Good morning, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. It's always wonderful to come back to my alma mater. So coming back to Davis is always something that's easy to do. When we learned that you were holding this conference through sort of the network of Elsevier, there was a good deal of excitement to wanting to participate. And when the group learned I was going to be here anyway, wanted to come and tell you and encourage you to take what's going on here very seriously, because as a professor and an administrator, actually chief scientist for USDA when NEFA was envisioned at the time, ontologies, SEMAC technologies are an empowering tool that I didn't really realize how powerful they were. And I'll give you sort of an example that you may know Elsevier as a publisher. What you may not know is when you combine Elsevier with its sister company, LexisNexis, we're the fourth largest data company in the world. And a lot of that is driven by the tools and the resources that the communities that depend on them help create. And agriculture, one of my first loves, is a community that could benefit from additional attention to that. So why Elsevier? We've realized that if you're not successful, we can't be successful. So we're committed to helping you do these types of things. And as you work through this process, and if there are needs that become apparent, we're open to be hearing from those to help you do that. The really fundamental thing is this, and I'm sure some of you have seen this movie, is that you really can't be an expert team in agriculture in any of these processes without having data. You may think you are, but if you can't find other experts, if you can't combine them, you really lose opportunities. It's a big topic. It's hard to get your hands around. Give you sort of an idea of what that is. This is the world of science. Each one of those dots is a journal. There's about 24,000 journals out there by 5,000 publishers. Each one of those journals are publishing dozens, if not hundreds, of papers with each issue. It just give you a sort of a sense, if you bore down that a little closer, you can just see how granular that is. That is a huge amount of information that's coming out all the time, and it's available to mine. It's available to use only if you can figure out how to access it. To give you an example of that, how we do that and why it's so important what you're doing is each paper comes with a plethora of information. But if you're relying on the title or a few key words, you will miss what the topic is. You will not be able to really understand what that paper is about. Fortunately, the technology has emerged over the past 10 years or so and continues to advance very rapidly to really understand where the science is and where it's going at a granular level. A good example of that is you can text mine the information, you can identify the concepts of that, but only if you have the right SEMAC technology and the right ontologies to do that. In the absence of that, you don't get granular enough to carry this forward and take advantage of it. We use a fingerprinting engine that I'll explain in just a moment. But the first thing I'd do, of course, if you were trying to understand who's doing what, where, and at what level, is to disambiguate all the authors out there. In our Scopus database, we have several tens of thousands of Chins and Lees, and I didn't really pay attention to when I was publishing a lot, what I used for a name. Was it B. Fenwick? Is it BW Fenwick? Is it Bradley Fenwick? You need to combine all those, and there's a great deal of effort to do that. We put all of those abstracts from everything that's in the Scopus database through a natural word processing engine. And I'm not going to go through a lot of detail there, but that really unpacks and has you understand what the paper is, at least at the abstract level, and increasingly we're fingerprinting the whole papers because the materials and methods are equally rich in terms of what's going on there, especially in reproducibility issues. Each one of those fingerprints produces essentially an ontology of what that paper is about, but how granular and how precise that is depends on the vocabulary that is developed for that discipline. And if it's very crude, then you really can't get to the granular level of identifying that paper. or that topic or that author as an expert. We also now realize that machine learning is good, but it's often not perfect, and we give the authors and others opportunity to use the sort of rheostats on the side to adjust what is the subject matter and what is the topic related to that paper. When you roll all these papers up, for you as an author, you get a fingerprint essentially of who you are as a scholar. So a good example of that, you may not really appreciate all the areas of expertise that you have because we tend to sort of lump ourselves in something. Give you an example of myself. I'm a infectious disease microbiologist. That would be the elevator introduction. But if somebody would need to know something about microbial chromatography, I probably ought to be on the short list, but I'd never labeled myself that way. It was only through this that I realized I used a lot of chromatography in my research, and if somebody needed that expertise, I'm probably somebody that could speak to that. To give you a sort of a better example of that, everybody that's published, we have about 8 million profiles of researchers around the world, and each one of them has a list like this of who they are as scholars. So if you've published anything or co-authored anything, we have a profile of you of who you are as a scholar essentially assembled by your publications. I wouldn't say it's perfect because not everything is in the Scopus database, especially things that aren't peer-reviewed, and that needs to be added. How precise that is in terms of who you are is really dependent on how good the thesaurus or the ontology is behind that. To give you a sort of example of where this goes and why it's so important, this is an example of an author, and there's 72 publications that come into creating the profile for this individual. We can look for similar experts. Maybe you were trying to find somebody that has expertise in this field, but the guy you found just isn't easy to work with or is busy. There are similar experts that have similar profiles you can find if you're assembling a team, if you're working on a problem. You can identify which journals that they're publishing their work in, so you can find more. And what's really exciting to me, you can essentially create a collaboration map in terms of who's working on very similar areas. So in its full built-out profile, you get a snapshot of an individual faculty member or researcher, and it tells you a lot about who they are as an expert. What's really powerful about this, though, is how you combine all those things. So you combine a bunch of individual fingerprints or faculty or researcher profiles, and suddenly you get a profile for a department or a center. Then you get a profile for an institution or a discipline. Then you can do it at a national level or in a sub-area. So once you get a bunch of profiles, you can combine those and look for expertise or lack of expertise in a certain area. And you can see all the various questions you can ask because of how this is building up. Good example of that is you may get called someday, or already have, out of the blue, to be a reviewer on a grant or a paper or be on a panel, and they go, how in the heck did they find me, and how the heck did they know I was an expert in that? Well, this is an example. We built this tool for NIH when they were having trouble finding experts to serve on their study sections. So these type of experts identification tools built on the semantic technology underlying those and those profiles really allows you to get much more granular than you can possibly imagine. At an institutional level or within a community, you can also group areas that are similar because of those profiles. Because those profiles overlap, and you may participate in many of those, but you can get to a level where you can see groups that are working on very similar problems that otherwise you wouldn't recognize, because in many cases, like a university, these sort of artificial constructs by departments and colleges and those types of things. Good example of that is this slide where you can create networks. And one of the powerful things about having a fingerprint engine is if you're interested in something, write a paragraph, write 2 paragraphs. We can fingerprint then and then ask the question using the right semantic technology, who can help you, who can you work with, who's an expert in that topic. One of the powerful things that's coming is we can fingerprint grants. So if NIFA issues a grant, we can fingerprint that grant and ask who in the world should be applying for that grant, because their profile fits what that grant is looking for quite cleverly. And you can also roll up, as over here, whole organizations, and this is the profile for all of North Carolina and all other institutions. Perhaps one of the most powerful ways that all of this we're working on is leading to is essentially our portals, where the public, whether it's industry or individual or another scholar, is looking for somebody to collaborate with or answer a question. You know instinctively that there's somebody out there, if you could just possibly find them, that can address what you're looking for. And increasingly, we're putting these kind of portals together where you type in what you're looking for, and because of all those profiles, you can identify individuals that otherwise would be essentially lost to you. So underlying all of this, we're very happy to be involved in this. We think what you're doing is critical to the success of your discipline and more broadly, the public at large. And the better ontologies, the better semantic, better definitions you can provide can feed into these systems so they are very much more precise, so that we can identify who and where the work is being done to bring people together in networks to solve some of these grand challenges that we face globally. I have to run off to another conference, unfortunately, but I'd be very happy and will be around to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to the conclusions of your conference and asking ourselves at Elsevier how we can contribute to your success. Thank you very much.